Hello and welcome to Smaulgld's Moronica this week for the week ended February 10th, 2018. We'll go through the week's news that made you scratch your head, cringe, or just say, that's moronic. Let's take a look at what we got. So our first story comes from Chai Girl. Polar bears are dangerous. If you want to take a look here, this polar bear was hanging around a Siberian oil rig, and Russians looking at the bear think it might be good for joke to feed the bear. Well, click on that and see what happens to Russian miners. They are not having good time. The next one comes from us. Brits can't pick from the United Kingdom. A study in the Daily Mail showed that Eastern Europeans pick vegetables 10 times faster than native Brits. I suppose virtue signaling is not a productive farm trait. Oh, I hope I'm not culturally appropriating. Oh, it's so cold out here. I broke me nail. Oh, I can't pick the lettuce right now. Have a break. Unbelievable. How can you pick 10 times faster? That means they're not doing any picking at all. What has Britain become? Now, your team wins a Super Bowl. What do? Well, you get a quick glimpse there. Click on that and you find out what the best thing to do after your team wins the Super Bowl. Everything is free. That's what happens after your team wins the Super Bowl, as the Philadelphia Eagles celebrated, or their fans celebrated, their victory. Whose country is it anyway? John Kasich. Last week, you remember, he said, if his country calls him, he may have to run for president. He's got his own country here now. It's not my country, he says, because ICE agents, they're dead wrong for enforcing the law. Well, not in his country, and one day maybe his country may call him. It may not be the United States, but John Kasich will heed the call. Dizzy Miss Lizzie, there she is. Senator Elizabeth Warren riling up the troops, saying, we march in pink pussy hats. Of course you do. Now, Schiff all over the place. Adam Schiff. Now, he is the ranking Democratic congressman on the Congressional Senate Intelligence Committee, and he's got Russia on his mind 24/7, and anything that the Republicans might do as part of that committee, like releasing memos, well, that could end up being a national security disaster. One as far as to imply that an Oklahoma City-style bombing could happen because of the FISA memo. Interestingly enough, Mr. Schiff earned his chops on Russian television, the Kremlin-owned TV station RT. Someone dug up an old video from 2013 of Adam Schiff on Russian television. Bad enough he was on the station, giving aid and comfort to those pesky Russians who are a threat to our national security, but the topic he was talking about was FISA warrants, and he was urging for greater transparency in FISA warrants and the whole FISA process. Except now he wants the FISA process slammed shut so no one can see what's going on. This wasn't lost on Donald Trump, who said little Adam Schiff, who is desperate to run for higher office, is one of the biggest liars and leakers in Washington, right up there with, and he names the top brass at the FBI, CIA, Comey, Warner, Brennan, and Clapper. Adam leaves closed committee hearings to illegally leak confidential information must be stopped. This is no joke. I believe Trump knows this, has the intel on this, and something big will break on it. We'll talk about that tomorrow in case you missed it. Top gold, silver, and crypto stories. If it wasn't bad enough that Schiff was outed for being on Russian television, he was also outed during the week for a phone call that he placed to what he believed to be Ukrainian spies who were going to give him the goods on Donald Trump. He spent 7-8 minutes talking to these comedians who pranked him and said, we have pictures of naked Trump. And Mr. Schiff was smacking his lips and saying, how do I get that? And of course, he says his staff will be in touch, and his staff followed up. Well, this is the kind of thing that the Democrats are saying that the Trump campaign did. They met with Russians. Okay. Well, here is Schiff meeting with Russians. We'll see tomorrow how Senator Warren also tried to arrange meetings with Russians. So it looks like everyone's talking to the Russians, and it's only illegal, or you only get a special prosecutor if you happen to have run for president as Donald Trump. Doesn't matter what is said, it's who says it. I love these types of things where you read to somebody, if they're a Republican, you read them a Democratic speech. If they're a Democrat, you read them a Republican speech. And you tell them it's their own, it's a Republican or it's a Democrat. And because they think that, they nod their head and they'd agree to anything. Well, here's one where students hate the Trump State of the Union speech, even though the quote's taken where Obama's State of the Union speech. The stock market is wrong, says Donald Trump. There was a wild week in the stock market with the prices plummeting. Largest all-time single-point drop in history, although not on a percentage basis. And you know, Donald Trump has been taking credit and claim for the stock market rising. And now that the stock market's headed the other direction, Donald Trump is saying, oh, well, the stock market obviously is wrong. Well, was it right for the last 11 months and now all of a sudden it's wrong? So Donald Trump is going to have to own the stock market one way or another, but I predict he won't own it if it collapses. He will try to distance himself from it and claim that the economy is more important than the stock market, even though for the first year of his presidency, the stock market was more important than the economy. Literally Stalin, Jeff Flake. He is an Arizona outgoing senator who is taken to Trump bashing. And literally stupid, he says that Trump uses words infamously spoken by Joseph Stalin. And I said, I don't know what he's talking about. But then I went back and I listened to the Trump State of the Union, and here's what I heard.
Который означает готовность поддержать нашу партию в ее борьбе за светлое будущее народа, в ее борьбе против войны, в ее борьбе за сохранение мира.
Well, there it is. Flake is right. Trump is literally Stalin. Who knew? Climate change is sexist. So says Hillary Clinton, because when, I'm sorry, this is stupid. I always thought climate change was racist or homophobic. I didn't know it was sexist. But she says that, and she's talking, this is at Georgetown. She's talking to supposedly intelligent, looked like there were just women in the audience, people, and she was trying to say that the burden of the disasters of climate change, so when the desertification was the word she used, I don't know if that's a term, happens, then the women are going to have to move the cattle, and the women are going to have to farm, and the men are just going to sit around and thinking, not our fault. Unbelievable. You listen to her and look at that look on her face. She said, yes, climate change is indeed sexist. We're out of here. Now, if you remember, Luis Gutierrez, he is I believe he's a congressman from Illinois, and he was triggered when the Republican and probably a few Democratic congressmen and senators, Congress people, to quote Justin Trudeau, started chanting USA. That was too much for him, and he hightailed out. Well, now he's threatening to break with the Democratic caucus if DACA deal is not in the spending caps agreement, and I guess it wasn't, so I bet you Luis Gutierrez is still part of the Democratic caucus. Nice threat. Rig the election. What does that even mean? Do you remember President Obama in 2016 when Donald Trump was concerned that they may try to steal the election from him? He gave a long and impassioned speech. There he is. There's things in place. And he was going on and on about how it was ridiculous. And I would suggest that Mr. Trump try to just take his votes to the people. You know, he was trying to make it sound like, stop your whining, stop your crying. There's no way you can rig an election. It's too decentralized. And just do better. And Hillary Clinton did the same thing. She said, if he loses, he should just carry on. Well, We don't need to. Hillary Clinton spent a year whining about how the election was stolen to her and how they hacked the election. But they're not giving up yet. There's a new report. Proof Russia successfully hacked into voter rolls during the 2016 election, even though Obama said that was impossible. Well, whose fault is that? Because the election was run under the Federal Elections Commission, and it was under the auspices of President Obama, who said that couldn't be done. Well, now they're saying it was done. Of course, if it was done, it could be only done by one entity, and that is Russia. Well, guess who weighed in? George W. Bush. He gave another intelligence briefing. He said there is pretty clear evidence that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. I'm sorry, not weapons of mass destruction, that they had hacked into the election. Now, who's going to believe George W. Bush, and what purpose does it serve to trot him out to say, we're now all convinced? The guy who said, no weapons over here, no weapons over here, he gave the big story, fought the Iraq War on weapons of mass destruction. It was intelligence that supposedly he had. He trotted out Colin Powell to give a big speech to convince everybody that there was, and it was necessary to take him out. And now he's trotting around saying that the Russians hacked our election. Newsflash. They tried to make a big story out of this. Trump prefers an oral briefing rather than a written briefing. And the underlying thing here is that he's an idiot. He can't read. Well, they're saying that Trump doesn't read the president's daily brief. If you've ever been in management, sometimes you know that reports are just things that people write because that's their job. So, if it was really important for Donald Trump to read everything and every word in there, he probably would do it. But also, if it's really important, the authors of the memo would probably tell him, and if that's how he set up his management of his intelligence briefings, I don't see what the issue is. But of course, that's not, you have to criticize whatever Donald Trump did. Now you too, Me Too leader accused of sexual harassment and groping. This is the irony of the week. Me Too movement lawmaker investigated for sexual misconduct allegations. So, here she is. She's, I believe, a California assemblywoman. She's popping off about this disaster that we have in terms of epidemic of sexual harassment, and now she's accused of it as well. Washington Post conservative. This is Jennifer Rubin. She puts that in her Twitter description of herself, that she's a conservative, which she's not. And she took a swipe at Rand Paul to try to hold up the budget because it was going to increase the deficit. And she said that the definition of intellectual dishonesty would be complaining about deficits after voting for a tax cut that'll cost $1.5 trillion. I don't know how a tax cut costs anything. It lowers a government's claim on people's income. The only people who think that a tax cut costs anything are liberals, Jennifer Rubin. So maybe you should change your tag in your, there it is, conservative blogger at the Washington Post, right turn. Now you know you're in trouble when the Washington Post trots her out as a conservative. Here's just a quick head scratcher. You've been hearing about threats to our democracy. The Russians are posing a threat to our democracy. And any time that Trump or anyone questions the FBI or the CIA or the Department of Justice or the State Department, they say he's undermining our democracy. Now, how is it when elected officials, such as Congress people, Senate people, President person, questions the act of unelected bureaucrats? Remember, Congress people, Senate people, and President people are elected through a democratic process. How is it when they question the acts of unelected bureaucrats, that's characterized as threatening our democracy? Well, here's our funniest story of the week. This guy, he is a this one is the best, because there's a guy, his name is, let's see what his name is. His name is, well, he called himself R.D. Here's Roger Dean Huffstetler. Now, he's running for Congress, and that's not funny. And he's running for Congress in Virginia. That's not funny either. But here is what's funny about good old Roger Dean. Now, Roger Dean is a Silicon Valley executive in California. Or should I say California. And someone noticed that when he gave his corporate speeches in Silicon Valley, he spoke with a indescript, it's a California accent, no hint of any regionality. Now he's running for Congress, and he put together this folksy homespun video, and he's just laying it on thick. And you should listen to this video. I won't play it for you, but he's talking about Grandma Sue, and then I started this here company, and it was my God-given right as an American, and as my proud mama would wanted me to do. So vote for me. He seriously, you listen to it. It sounds, it's a little exaggerated, but he really sounds like that. He's like, here he is. This is his tweet. Despite all our struggles, Mama used to tell me you could do anything you want. And I believe her then, and I still do now. So he's an American. He's entitled to run for office, and that's what he's going to do. So help him God. This reminds me when Hillary Clinton, when pandering for votes in Missouri, she's up there and says, and I ain't no ways tired. Of course you're not. You're just nuts. All right, well, this is the last story. The Intercept. This is beyond. This is a head scratcher. I don't know if it's Moronica. This one doesn't make any sense. And I think Edward Snowden puts a nice characterization exactly what this story is about. So he says Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist at The Intercept, James Rising, says the CIA tried to avoid learning what Russia had on Trump. And he thinks this is incredible. I think this is Moronica. Because here's how they get to that conclusion that the CIA tried to avoid learning what happened to Donald Trump. So here's how the story goes. This is what's there's something really dumb in the story, and then the story itself is a head scratcher. So here's the Moronica in the story. Supposedly, the NSA lost some top confidential, top secret, whatever the highest classification is, documents. And they wanted the Russians' help to get them back. Okay, so you lose the documents. Once they're out there, they're lost. Okay, so I don't get how the Russians are going to say, oh, look, found documents. Here you go. You have them back. You know, once they've been out there, they're no longer going to be kept confidential. So they had that part of the story where the NSA was trying to get these documents back from the Russians. And they met with the Russians, and the Russians are like, well, we can't help you with documents, but we do have dirt on Trump. Maybe we have pictures, naked Trump. And the story goes, according to the guy at The Intercept, is that the CIA did not want to accept this Trump-related material, they called it, because they were concerned, because this is Pompeo and he's a Trump ally, that they might find out something from Trump. Now, first of all, this whole story is unsourced. They don't say who met with whom at the CIA. They don't say whom they met with Russia. They don't say what the materials were. And then, as Donald Trump points out, Russia, according to New York Times, sold phony secrets on Trump to the U.S. asking price was $10 million, brought it down to $1 million to be paid over time. Hope these people start seeing and understanding what is going on here. This story just sounds so concocted because the premise of the story that the NSA is trying to get Russians to help them to give them back documents that they lost. So I have breaking. U.S. tried to negotiate with Russian chef to reheat a souffle. Chef offers Trump-related materials instead. It makes no sense. They're out looking to get back documents from a foreign entity, and then the foreign entity says, sorry, comrade, we can't help you with documents, but we have Trump-related stuff. You want? What? And they're basically trying to peddle and trying to make money now. They got these, seems like hapless people saying, oh, we lost our documents. We lost our documents. Can you help us? And they're saying, no, we can't help you with the documents, but we got some Trump stuff we can sell you. Really? That story doesn't make much sense at all. You know, we understand loss of documents feel bad. We make you feel better. We give you no charge. Well, maybe $10 million for Trump-related information. Well, that about does it for today. We'll see you tomorrow on the In Case You Missed It, Top Gold and Silver and Crypto Stories for the week ended February 13th. Thank you very much for listening.